I first noticed
I
her
love
in
how
the
you're
least
always cooking
remarkable way
something new.
possible. Just
Well,
another figure
you know
coming
I like
down
to
the apartment
experiment.
stairwell, juggling grocery bags that looked too heavy for one person. I was halfway through unlocking my door, but I hesitated. Not because she needed help. She had that efficient, practiced way of moving, like she'd done this alone for years. It was the quiet composure that caught me. The way she shifted her wrist, balancing the weight against her hip, gave me the urge to say something. I didn't. Instead, I watched her disappear into her door 2 units down. That was 3 weeks before I knew her name. Mornings in the building are muted. Coffee smell from someone's kitchen, the hum of pipes, the slam of a car door outside. I kept my routines the same. Instant coffee, checking my phone for messages that weren't there, scrolling through feeds until the silence felt too long. My girlfriend texted sometimes, but our conversations were thinning out. 3-word replies, emojis as placeholders. I started leaving them unread, like I was waiting for something more. Something she didn't seem to have the time or the inclination to give. That was the headspace I was in when the package showed up at my door. A brown box, my name nowhere on it. Inside, a thermos wrapped in tissue paper, the kind of thoughtful, useful gift you buy for someone who works too hard. When I saw the label on the shipping slip, her name, I carried it down the hall. She opened the door after a pause, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You didn't have to bring it. Her voice was calm, but not unfriendly. She took the box, setting it just inside without looking at it. It was sitting outside my door, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Thought it might be yours. Her eyes flicked to mine, briefly, steady, then gone. Thanks. I could have left it there. Should have, probably. But I lingered, watching how her fingers tapped lightly against the cardboard, like she was working something out in her head. You're in 3B, right? She asked finally. I nodded. Yeah. Thought so. She smiled faintly, as though confirming something about me she hadn't decided until then. That was it. Door closed. And yet, the hallway felt warmer when I walked back to my place. After that, I started noticing her everywhere. Folding laundry in the basement room, sitting with a paperback in the courtyard, waiting for water to boil in her kitchen with the blinds half open. It was an obsession, more like recognition, seeing someone who seemed to exist in the same kind of silence I did. Once, in the laundry room, we both reached for the detergent at the same time. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Go ahead. I take forever to measure mine anyway. I smiled back, folding the edge of a dryer sheet in my hand just to keep it occupied. You don't strike me as the measuring type. Her brow lifted slightly, amused. And what type do I strike you as? I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because the words that came to mind felt too close to the truth. Independent. Beautiful. Out of reach. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The dryer buzzed. She picked up her basket, and with a quick glance over her shoulder, she left. Later that night, as I scrolled through unread messages from my girlfriend, I found myself pausing over the empty text bar, fingers hovering. Not typing, not deleting, just waiting. That's when the buzz of a new notification broke the stillness. It wasn't my girlfriend. It was her. Coffee tomorrow? I'll bring the thermos. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart moving faster than my thoughts. That was how it began. Coffee turned into something quieter than I expected. No cafe, no clatter of cups. She brewed it herself in that thermos I'd delivered, pouring it into mismatched mugs in her kitchen. The space was small, warm, lived in. The kind of place where the walls held a history you could almost hear if you stayed still long enough. She slid one mug across the table. It keeps better in here, she said, tapping the thermos. Habit from years of long commutes. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the cup though it was too hot. I wanted to ask more, about where those commutes led, what she did, who she came home to. But I didn't. Instead, we sat in a kind of hovering quiet, sipping, letting the minutes stretch. Eventually, she broke it. I used to drink 3 cups before noon. Kept me going. My daughter used to tease me about it. Her tone shifted, lighter, but edged with something. I looked at her then, the way her gaze slid past me toward the window. That was the first time she mentioned her daughter. My girlfriend. I forced a smile. Guess caffeine's a family trait then. She laughed softly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Later, when I offered to carry down the trash bags that had been piling near her door, she didn't refuse. We walked the narrow stairwell together, bags bumping against our legs. It felt too intimate. Almost, the quiet labor of moving in sync. Halfway down, she said, almost absent-mindedly. You remind me of someone I knew at your age. He used to help me with errands too. I wanted to ask who. I didn't. Instead, I let the words hang, imagining the outlines of some ghost I'd never meet. At the dumpsters, she leaned against the railing, brushing her palms together. Her hair fell loose, catching the late light. I noticed my hands tightening on the bag handle even after it was empty. You don't talk much, she said, looking at me. I shrugged. Most people don't listen much. She tilted her head, considering. Maybe that's why I don't mind you around. Back in my apartment, I kept circling that line. My girlfriend's text sat unopened. I tried to picture her mother saying the same thing to anyone else, the delivery guy, another neighbor. But the way she said it lingered, as though it was meant only for me. I shouldn't think like that. I knew it. She was older, she was hers, and I was what? Bored? Lonely? Searching? I didn't have the language for it. Just the pull of it. A few nights later, I ran into her in the laundry room again. She was folding towels, slow and precise. I reached for one to help, my fingers brushing hers. She froze, not pulling back. Just a second, no more. Then she exhaled softly, almost like a laugh. You fold better than my daughter ever did. It was a throwaway line, probably, but I felt it all the way down. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It became a pattern without either of us admitting it. I'd knock, sometimes under the excuse of returning something borrowed. A book, a dish, once even the thermos she'd already given me coffee in. She didn't question it. She just let me in. This time, I found her in the living room, sleeves rolled up, a half-folded blanket on the couch. The TV was on low, some documentary she wasn't really watching. She gestured to the chair without looking at me. You always come by when I'm cleaning, she said lightly. Maybe you're always cleaning. That made her smile, but faintly, like it had been earned. I sat, watched the way her hands smoothed the blanket, then smoothed it again as if the fabric could hold her distraction. At some point she poured us both tea. Chamomile, not coffee this time. The steam curled between us, filling the space with something softer, quieter. I used to make this when my daughter was nervous before exams, she said, then stopped herself, as if realizing too late what she'd offered me. I swallowed, fingers tapping against the mug. And now, her eyes flicked up, held mine longer than usual. Now I just make it for myself. Silence followed. Not empty, but heavy. I wanted to ask if she was lonely, if she thought about the future, if she ever imagined what it would feel like if the sound of footsteps broke it. Someone moving in the hall, voices muffled. She set her mug down too quickly, a small splash on the saucer. You should go, she said, not meeting my eyes. I left, but only to the stairwell. Leaned against the railing, listening to her door close with that soft click. My chest felt hollow, restless. The next day, I avoided her. Tried to. My girlfriend had texted, finally, about dinner Friday. I typed, yes sure, and stared at the words for 10 minutes before hitting send. But that evening, when I came back from work, she was sitting outside on the courtyard bench. A book open, though she wasn't reading. You don't usually sit out here, I said, surprising myself by stopping. Change of routine, she replied. Her thumb kept brushing the edge of the page without turning it. I sat. Too close, maybe. Close enough that I could hear her breath catch before settling again. People will notice, she said after a moment. I shrugged, though my heart was pounding. We're just talking. Her laugh was soft, bitter at the edges. That's how everything starts. The air shifted. The book slipped from her lap to the bench between us. We both reached for it at the same time, and her hand landed on mine. Neither of us moved. Her fingers tightened, just for a second. My breath stalled. I leaned. Not enough, not quite. She pulled her hand back first. Don't, she whispered. But the way she said it, it sounded more like a plea than a warning. It happened on a Tuesday evening. The courtyard lights had just flickered on, buzzing faintly, and I found her sitting on the bench again. Same spot as before, though this time she didn't have a book. Just her hands folded in her lap, as if she'd been waiting. I almost kept walking. My girlfriend had texted earlier, asking if I'd call. I hadn't replied. I wasn't ready to. Long day, I asked, easing down beside her. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed on the trees, branches shifting against the twilight. Finally, long life. I smiled at that, but it was the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. For a while we sat without speaking. I could hear her breathing, measured but not calm. She tapped her thumb against her knee, over and over, until she caught herself and stilled it. "You ever wonder," she said quietly, "if you've already wasted the best parts of yourself on the wrong people?" Her voice wasn't sharp. It was low, thoughtful, almost conversational. But I felt the sting all the same. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I'm still figuring out who the right people are." Her eyes flicked toward me then, sharp, searching. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because." She stopped, shook her head. "Because you don't know what they mean." The silence grew heavy. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I did know, that I'd been thinking of nothing else. Instead I said, "My girlfriend, she doesn't really see me. Not the way you do." Her breath caught, just faintly, enough that I heard it. "You're young," she said, softer now. "You think being seen is everything. But it comes with a price. Maybe I don't care." Her laugh was short, brittle. "You should." She stood then, pacing a few steps, arms folded across her chest. For the first time, she looked unsettled, vulnerable even. "Do you know what people would think if they saw us like this?" she asked. "On this bench, night after night?" "Neighbors talk anyway," I said. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." The words hit harder than I expected. I followed her with my eyes, waiting for her to sit again. She didn't. Instead, she turned, her voice low, almost trembling. "You remind me of the way I used to feel, when everything was ahead of me, before I started making choices I couldn't take back." Something cracked in the way she said it. Not loud, not dramatic, but raw. I stood, closed the space between us until there was only an arm's length left. My pulse was quick, reckless. "You're not wasting your life," I said. "Not to me." Her eyes softened, then closed for half a second, as though she was steadying herself. When she opened them again, the distance between us felt thinner than air. She whispered, "Don't make me cross this line." And still, neither of us stepped back. The next morning, I half expected her to text. Something simple. Coffee, tea, another excuse to sit in that kitchen. But the screen stayed empty. By evening, her blinds were drawn. No light spilling into the courtyard. No sign of her on the bench. For 3 nights, nothing. I told myself not to care. My girlfriend was suddenly attentive again, sending long messages, suggesting we plan something for the weekend. I typed back polite answers, each one feeling like I was writing in someone else's voice. But every time I walked past her door, my chest tightened with the same question. Why now? On the 4th day, I saw her. Not in the courtyard or stairwell, but outside, loading boxes into her car. She didn't see me at first. I stood at the top of the steps, watching her shove one box into the trunk, her movements sharp, impatient. Finally, she looked up, froze. "You moving?" I asked, my voice catching on the words. "Just clearing out storage," she said quickly. Too quickly. I nodded, but didn't move. "You could have asked for help." Her mouth tightened. I didn't want help. There was something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not coldness. More like a decision she'd already made and didn't want to explain. I started, but stopped. The words sounded wrong the second they left my mouth. She slammed the trunk shut. The sound echoed in the parking lot. "You don't know me," she said finally. "Not really. You've built some idea, and it isn't fair. Not to me. Not to you." It felt rehearsed, like she'd been holding it in for days. I wanted to argue, to tell her about every small thing I'd noticed. The way she tapped her thumb when she was restless, how she always smoothed the blanket twice before folding it. Proof that I did see her. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just said, "So what now?" She looked at me for a long moment. Something softened, almost regret. Then she turned, walked back inside, leaving the trunk half full, the boxes crooked. That night, I typed a message. "I don't care if it's wrong. I don't care what people think. Just don't shut me out." I stared at it for 20 minutes, then deleted it. The cursor blinked on an empty screen. Across the hall, her light stayed off. The silence between us lasted nearly a week. Long enough that I started believing she'd meant it, that I didn't know her, that I wasn't supposed to. Then, one evening, as I was heading upstairs, her door opened. She stepped out holding a mug, like she'd been standing inside debating whether to do it. "Walk with me?" she asked. Her tone was casual, but her eyes weren't. We ended up in the courtyard, the same bench where everything seemed to start. The air was cool, the kind that made every sound sharper, the rustle of leaves, the hum of a streetlight. She set her mug on the bench beside her, cradling it with both hands when she sat. I waited. She didn't speak at first, just traced the rim with her thumb, over and over. Finally, I didn't mean to push you away. Not like that. I swallowed. Felt like you did. I know. Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it. I thought if I stopped it early, maybe it wouldn't matter. But it already does. Too much. The words landed heavy. Not dramatic, not loud. Just true. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the gravel. My pulse was hammering, but my voice came out low, almost steady. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted. I think about you more than I should. I stopped, ran a hand over my face. And I hate myself for not feeling guilty enough. She turned then, studying me in that way she had, sharp but tired, like she was measuring whether I could handle the truth. I feel it too, she said. Quiet, measured, but wanting and having are different things. You'd regret me. I looked at her, really looked. The lines near her eyes, the way her hair slipped loose from the clip, the exhaustion she carried like another layer of clothing. Or maybe I wouldn't, I said. Maybe regret is better than never knowing. Her laugh was soft, almost a sigh. She shook her head, staring at her mug like it could hold the answer. You make everything sound so simple. It doesn't feel simple. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The night pressed in. My hand sat uselessly between us on the bench, twitching once, twice. Then, without looking at me, she set her hand on mine. Light, careful, like testing water. I didn't move, didn't grip or pull away, just stayed there, our hands resting together on the rough wood. She finally glanced up, a small, almost broken smile tugging at her mouth. Okay, she whispered. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forever. It was just now. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Time didn't shift all at once. It was quieter than that, little adjustments that only made sense looking back. I stopped waiting for her texts to feel urgent. She stopped pretending she didn't want me knocking at her door. And somehow, in between, we settled into something that didn't need naming. Some mornings, she'd tap on my door at 8:47, thermos in hand, like she'd memorized the exact minute I'd be half awake. Some nights, I'd find her in the courtyard again, no book this time, just the two of us sharing the bench like it was reserved. It wasn't dramatic, just steady, like water wearing down stone. Her daughter came by once, for a weekend. We barely crossed paths. She called out a casual hey to me in the hall, and I answered like nothing in the world was strange. But later, when the apartment was quiet again, she leaned against my doorway, looking relieved and tired all at once. She didn't notice, she said. She won't, I told her. Unless we want her to. Her smile was small, worn at the edges. She handed me a mug of chamomile. You always make it sound simple. I grinned, remembering. It doesn't feel simple. She laughed softly into her tea, and the sound stuck with me the whole night. Months slipped by. The guilt that used to hang between us started to fade, not gone, but softer, like background noise you only hear when the room gets too still. We found a rhythm. Sometimes that meant brushing shoulders in the laundry room. Sometimes it meant sitting in silence while the kettle boiled. I think the moment I knew it was real, not a phase, not a distraction, came one evening on the bench. The air was cold, and she brought a blanket, tossing one end over my lap without a word. We sat under it, the streetlight buzzing above us, steam curling from her tea mug. Neither of us said anything for a long time. And still, it felt like a conversation. Life wasn't perfect. I still left messages from my girlfriend unopened until they eventually stopped coming altogether. She still had days where her past weighed too heavy, when she pulled back into herself. But in those moments, I'd find small ways to remind her. Carrying down the trash bags, folding the blanket twice, the way she always did. Showing up at 8:47, thermos in hand, before she even knocked. And each time, she'd look at me like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to keep finding. I don't know what we are. I don't think I need to. I just know that when she sets her hand on mine, light, careful, like always, I feel the same quiet truth every time. It's enough. And somehow, that's everything. Sparkle's engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?